Hmm. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I'm happy to be here with you today. It is May 4th. It is approximately 6 p.m., and I thank you for joining us. It is, it's a troubling day because we're having a conversation, and we want to talk about Jordan Neely. We want to talk about the New York subway system, the crime that has just been committed, and as User Has Been Banned has just mentioned, it's the 1980s, the 1990s, where we're seeing crime on the rise and the public reacting to it. But there is a twist to that. There is something different about it this time than we have ever seen before. And that is that we're suddenly seeing all this crime, we're seeing all of this result in racism. At least that's the claim that is being made. Now, in a moment, we're going to be joined live on Rumble, and we are trying to get this over to politics.tv. We're seeming to have some kind of trouble connecting to that at this moment, but we do hope that they will join us very shortly. Very simply, the question is Jordan Neely innocent, or is he a criminal? Did he get murdered, or was this an accidental death? And when we get everyone on Rumble joining us, I will restate that. But it's a very important question because it's going to affect all of our lives. Because we're about to see, well, I'll explain it in just a few moments when everybody on Rumble is able to join us. But that's really the question of racism. And how is this going to affect us all going forward? We've still got a few moments to come before Rumble is online and able to join us. Hopefully the Politics channel will be able to join us as well. But I'm deeply troubled. I'm deeply, deeply troubled by this and what it means for America overall. Come on. Where is... I'm just waiting for Rumble to catch up here. I don't know why it's not on. Come on. Well, anyway, let's go forward. If you're not aware of what happened with Jordan Neely, the answer is that Jordan Neely was, he's a homeless guy, and as you can see in this video, this is from the New York Post, from Juan Alberto Vasquez. He took this video, and you've probably seen this image across America. It's been a big conversation where the black man, as you can see on the subway train, he's sitting here, he's laid down, he's being held by an individual who's been identified as a ex-Marine, and a black man and a white man. So 3 individuals were holding down Jordan Neely. Fine. And Jordan Neely was being held because he was an aggressor. He came into the subway car. He made statements saying that he was hungry, that he was homeless. He didn't care if he died. And he threw down his jacket looking like he was going to become very violent. This is reported by all the news media. That's something that you heard from the New York Times. That's been said by the New York Post, by Newsweek. This is coming from the person who was doing the live stream, that people felt endangered, that something was about to happen, that this wasn't just somebody being hungry, this was somebody who was an aggressor. And that's important to understand. That's an important aspect of this. Why is this not updating on Rumble? Excuse me, folks. I'm trying to see why this is or isn't updating with Rumble. We should be live on everything, but it doesn't seem to be doing that. Okay. So we know that this guy isn't a nice guy. He's not a good guy. He's got issues. He's a problem. And I'm very concerned about that. I'm very concerned that he endangers people's lives. And we all should be concerned that he's endangering people's lives. So what do we do? Well, if you're the Young Turks, they played this, and I have to be very careful on what I can show. I can't really show more than we can see that Jordan Neely is struggling. He's being held down. This isn't a white on black thing. That's the thing that's being said across America. This is racism. That is an example of racism. I will tell you, no, it's not. Jordan Neely didn't die because he was a racist, because he got attacked by racists. Jordan Neely didn't die because he was homeless. Jordan Neely died because he's a violent criminal. Jordan Neely died because of the choices he made in his lifestyle. Jordan Neely died because progressive policies failed him and the rest of the people in New York City. That's a very strong statement. And I'm happy to hear from anyone. 607-242-9247. You can call in. You can leave a comment like user has been banned. And you can tell me, Mike, I disagree with you completely. That's just not the case. Yes, it is the case. He didn't die because he's black. He died because he's a violent criminal. He died because he has been arrested 42 times for multiple violent attacks. He had a warrant out for his arrest at the time of his death for a violent attack. He is a violent criminal, a repeat offender. And he had mental issues, it seems. Absolutely. And that doesn't excuse anything. Being black is absolutely irrelevant to the situation. But yet we have BLM, we have the Young Turks that are trying to tell you that this is something that is absolutely horrendous because of racism. That's what they want you to understand. They want you to think it's racism. I want you to hear what the Young Turks had to say about this. Okay, so do you hear what he's saying, the Young Turks? Oh, this is because he was causing a ruckus. No, he was threatening people. He was intimidating people. He was there to cause a problem, as he had done well over 40 times before. Not because he was black, but because he was acting in an aggressive manner, and he's a criminal. Okay, and he often, repeatedly, was on the F train, intimidating, coercing individuals, and causing attacks and harm to people on the F train. It wasn't the first time he had done that. Many of those people had seen him multiple times at that station causing harm. But the Young Turks would like you to believe, well, this is innocent. He was just asking for food. And he was unfairly put into a headlock. I disagree with that. They want you to believe that being homeless was the crime in this case. Look at the news here. This is from the New York Times. Subway rider choked homeless man to death. Oh, okay. So homelessness, that's the big thing. He's homeless. No. Let's throw that out the window. Let's go into the article, and you can see that there are multiple paragraphs that you have to go through before you get to what witnesses actually said. Do you see how far this is the middle of the article? And what they finally say is that Mr. Neely was acting hostile and erratic. That Juan Alberto Vasquez, not related, a freelance journalist who was riding in the train and shot the video, said that not the victim, the aggressor, this repeat criminal, was yelling about being hungry and thirsty, saying, quote, "I don't mind going to jail and getting life in prison." Why would you say that you don't mind getting life in prison? That means you're telling people you're about to do something, that you are willing to do criminal acts that would leave you in jail forever. First thing that comes to anyone's mind is, I'm about to kill someone. I want you to keep that in mind when you think about this. This is why the New York Times buried the quote. Why you're seeing the news media ignore this. Why the Young Turks wants to say it was a ruckus that this man said, "I'm willing to get life in prison. I'm ready to die." Isn't that a statement by someone who's saying, "I'm willing to kill someone"? Because that's what I would think. That's what I think any normal person would think. If someone walks up to you and says, "I'm willing to die today, I'm willing to go to jail for life," I'm hearing that you're about to do something, that you're threatening me. And that's not because he's black, that's not because he's homeless, it's because he's a criminal who engages in violent actions on a repeated basis, and people on the F train have run into him for multiple years being violent and attacking people. This isn't about racism. It's never been about racism. The BLM wants you to believe that. The far left wants you to believe that. The news media is trying to convince you of that. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wants you to believe this is about being black, that this is a black lynching. This is stupid. That is the most obvious emotional manipulation. See, they kind of forget the fact that, as I showed you, and the very first thing that you could see about this, when you see the video of this, I want to remind you that the people in there, that's a black man holding him down. There were 3 people that were struggling to hold this criminal down. But yet they want to say, well, it's the white guy. 3 people were holding him down, including a black man. A Spanish man was watching the whole thing and recording it. If they thought Neely was unjustly being held against his will, that he was being violent, that he was being attacked, wouldn't they have said something? Would they have done something? Let's go back to what the New York Times buried in here. The kind of language might have led other passengers to believe that Jordan Neely was going to do something violent. Well, no kidding. Quote, "I imagine that the collective feeling on the train was that something was happening. How could it be anything but that?" But it's okay, because Jordan Neely, we don't want to focus on he's a criminal. The Young Turks avoid mentioning he has a criminal record. They avoid mentioning he has mental illness. No, they want to focus on he's black and he's homeless and that's why he was attacked. No, he wasn't. That's not the truth. Let me dispel this immediately for everyone who's watching. I have been homeless. I have spoken about homelessness. I am an advocate for the homeless. You can go back. Here's 5 years ago when I was talking about homelessness, when I go over to SUNY Broome, a New York State college, and I have spoken to students about this year after year after year, where I've talked about homelessness, how it feels to be homeless, what it is to be homeless. And that's just one of multiple events where I've talked about homelessness. And I can tell you firsthand, being homeless doesn't mean violence. Being black and homeless doesn't equal violence. So to say that, oh, well, Jordan Neely, he was just violent because he's homeless, and that's justified, is a lie. It's not normal, and it's not necessary. It's not a requirement. So it's not an excuse. But yet the media wants you to think it's an excuse. They want to hide away the facts from you. They want to sell you the idea that this is racist because it helps BLM, and it helps to make you afraid, and it helps to make you comply. It helps to keep you afraid so that when the progressives say, we're going to do something, you're going to say, yes, do something. And then they do something that has no help for you. Because they're going to say, well, the answer is bail reform, except that doesn't fix the problem. Then they're going to tell you, well, we have to have social justice and we have to lower the crimes and release people and let them out early because they're black committing these crimes. That's not going to help you. Bail reform is not helping you. That doesn't resolve the problem. Dow says, did I just warp into Sunday? No. I know I normally do the Sunday live stream, but I wanted to talk about this because as an advocate for the homeless, for someone who has been homeless, for someone who is black and Hispanic and is native, New York City. I grew up in New York City. I spent the first 20 years of my life in New York City. This is crap. People are being taken advantage of. And we need to talk about this because BLM is now trying to rile up people's emotions and create a new saint, another person to stand right next to George Floyd and justify autonomous zones across this nation, to justify riots and arson and murder across this country. They're trying to justify putting you into terror of your life to obey the far left messaging, which will not help you. And we need to call that out in the harshest terms necessary. Now, when I say it's 42 times, to Jordan Neely, 42 times. This is from Newsweek. And again, they bury the information in the articles so that you're not seeing this. Jordan Neely's criminal record, man killed on subway, had 40 prior arrests. You would think this would be the information they would lead with. They don't. You have to go through paragraph after paragraph after paragraph after paragraph after paragraph after paragraph to finally get to them mentioning that he had 42 arrests, which include assault, that at the time of the death, he was on an active warrant for death. They want to bury this, even though this is the purpose of this article from Newsweek, is to tell you that this is a criminal. A violent criminal, a violent repeat criminal. But they don't want you to think about that. They want you to think about, isn't it sad? Let me be very clear. I don't feel sad that Jordan Neely is dead. It's unfortunate. It's sad to some people, but it is a direct result of not only his actions, but the fact that the progressive left justified him. They gave him every single opportunity to continue to commit crime. That's the problem. That's the issue. And that's why I'm upset. Because this isn't a black thing. It's not a white thing. It's not a Hispanic thing. This has nothing to do with any of those things. And if you are falling into that trap, you are being used. You're being used by the far left, individuals like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, to try and give them political power because of your fear and your emotional manipulation. Because you're trying to make a saint out of yet another criminal. Why is it that the far left, every time that BLM and Antifa and the far left want to put up someone as a hero, as a symbol of police abuse, it's always a violent criminal in the middle of taking violent action every single time? Rayshard Brooks, George Floyd, now this gentleman, George Neely. Think about it. Dow says, the guy on the subway, the death is tragic. I feel the Marine was justified. I think New York City, New York State, and Democratic national policy killed the man, not the Marine. I will absolutely tell you, I don't think this was a tragic death. It's a natural consequence of the choices that were made and the far left policies that are enabling that kind of crime and violence. And we need to say that publicly. I mean, everyone's terrified to say, oh my God, I have to speak out because this is natural. This is the absolutely normal consequence of what we see. When you have bail reform, when you drop the charges on individuals based on social justice and their skin color, when you're changing the laws to match a political agenda, when you defund the police, reduce the number of police officers so it takes longer and longer for people to actually be helped, this is the natural consequence of that. That you're going to be more in danger and more people will die, the aggressors and the victims. We have to say this. And everyone is walking on eggshells, afraid to say that. They're trying to say, this is a black lynching. No, it's not. He wasn't targeted for being black. He wasn't targeted for being homeless. I know the Young Turks would like you to believe that. I know that BLM would like you to think that. The far left, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they want you to think that this guy he was being targeted for being black and for being homeless. It's so ridiculous. And as someone who has been homeless, as someone who has lived in New York City for most of my youth, almost all my life, 20 years, as someone who understands this issue, they're lying to your face. They're taking advantage of you. They want to sell you this idea so that you will comply to your disadvantage. I have to say this and make it clear. And I know it sounds like, well, Mike, you said that, all right, but it has to sink in, folks. It really, really does. Because I know that you are hearing these things. Hang on a second. I just want to leave a message on Rumble. Hang on a second. So it's very upsetting here that we're seeing this over and over again. Now, again, if there is anyone in New York City, any Democrat politician, any progressive, any member of BLM, or Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, Citizen Action, Indivisible New York, any of these far left organizations that disagree with me and think this is some horrible crime that has happened, please do me a favor, call in 607-242-9247. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me how this isn't a direct consequence of the progressive policies. Tell me how this isn't a direct result of the choices of Jordan Neely. No one else. Jordan Neely. Please, I would love to hear that argument. And don't try and lie to me and say, well, Jordan Neely, he wasn't an aggressor. Yes, the New York Times says so. Newsweek says so. When Juan Alberto Vasquez, who took the videotape, who was there present, tells us, yes, he was. So you can't say he wasn't an aggressor. He's the criminal. He's the one who caused this problem. And you can't tell me, well, it's because he's homeless and people are targeting homeless people. No, they're not. They didn't target him because he was homeless. There are lots of homeless in New York City subways. There's lots of homeless people all throughout New York City. There are how many people who are homeless throughout all of San Francisco as they crap on the streets, their feces, making it completely unsanitary? There are, 60,000 people easily in various cities across America that are homeless. I speak about homelessness on a regular basis. You can't tell me, well, homeless, so he's being targeted for that. No, that's a lie. But they want you to believe this. They want you to think this is true. The real problem at the end of the day, and I'm going to get to Maine Dingus and Dalgrim, I'm going to answer your comments in just one second, but the real problem here has to do with choices and consequences, both from the far left and from the criminals, and now for the rest of us. Maine Dingus says, why isn't anyone reporting that Jordan Neely took a huge dump in his pants when... Oh, excuse me. Maine Dingus, that's just sad. Look, Dow says, I am a big believer in natural consequences. I also believe life is valuable. Losing life is tragic in the sense of ruination of value. Don't deny it doesn't or shouldn't happen. You don't deny it doesn't happen or shouldn't happen. I'm not saying that it's unfortunate that Jordan Neely died. It is unfortunate. It's unfortunate that he made the choices that led to his death. I would say that about anyone. Just like it's unfortunate George Floyd died because of the consequences of the life he chose to lead. But that does not make it racist, nor does it make it the problem of the people involved. We have to be honest. We're never going to resolve this, and it's only going to get worse. Because right now, part of the problem of it getting worse isn't just that they're trying to make the crimes less, where they're trying to release these criminals because of bail reform, because they're trying to, under social justice, to remove the penalty of these crimes so that criminals can commit them more and more often. That's not the end of it. But then we have BLM and Antifa who are trying to rile up the public, to create riots, to create arson, to destroy the homes of the people who are in the most poor neighborhoods, because that's where the riots always happen. In poor neighborhoods, burning down their own businesses, burning down their own homes, that only hurts them more. And then we have the autonomous zones that are created, which they've tried to do in Brooklyn already. They already tried to create the autonomous zone in 2020. We have autonomous zones across this country, like the defenders of the Atlanta forest right now, who are currently continuing to destroy Atlanta. They've attacked the police. They've destroyed public property. This isn't an advantage. This doesn't help anyone. And every single autonomous zone ever created is an insurrection zone. It is, by definition, a violation of every local, state, and federal law. Every single one. They are autonomous insurrectionist zones, where we have people from other countries coming into these autonomous zones to destroy America, to destroy our property, to destroy our infrastructure, to create nothing but chaos, and to divide our nation. And that's truly why this story is such a big deal, why it's being spread across the nation, why BLM is screaming at the top of their lungs, trying to make you feel like this is George Floyd all over again. Because they want to destroy this nation. They want to divide people, because they want you to think about anything except the natural consequences of what was done. That's what the Young Turks went on TV to do. That's why the Young Turks were talking about it, because they don't want you to think about the natural consequences. When you reduce or eliminate the consequences of crime, when you take away the funding for mental health, when you demonize people because of the color of their skin, you create situations like this and worse. That's the problem. We need to really be honest with each other. And if you really think I am wrong on that, I would love to hear why. Tell me how I am wrong. Because I can't see it. I don't see how I am wrong on this in being honest with you. Dow says, they destroy those neighborhood properties. That dovetails with the current administration's new housing equity financing policy starting next month. Yeah. Look, it's very obvious. Part of the problem is, as stated by New York City's practical progressive mayor. Again, Eric Adams called himself a practical progressive. And what does he say, as according to the Independent out of the United Kingdom? That the latest budget proposal for New York State will cut funding to the Department of Homeless Services. That's not helping anyone. On the one hand, they're telling us, well, this guy was mentally ill, so you have to excuse and allow him to be violent and to attack people and to be a threat to people, to the extent that he is saying that he is willing to go to jail for life, that he is willing to kill people, and you just have to accept it. It's okay. No, it's not okay. And the problem isn't the fact that he's black. I could care less. And you should care less, because the color of his skin has nothing to do with it. The Marine that they're trying to blame this on, that they're using as a scapegoat for this whole thing, he's white. What about the black man that was restraining him too? What about everyone else that was there watching everything? What about everyone who held him down? Oh, we don't want to talk about that. That's not important. No. They're specifically pointing out one man so that they can make the claim that this was racially motivated. And even though, as video shows us, it's not just one race. It's not a racial thing. No one was making racial epithets during the entire event. See how they're twisting this? Do you see how they're using this against you? Because they're ignoring the actual video evidence that is in front of them. This wasn't just the white guy walked up and just put this homeless guy into a chokehold. That didn't happen. And by the way, in talking about Marines, and I'm going to get to your comments in just 1 second, but in talking about Marines, let me be very clear about that. Marines aren't trained to subdue anyone. So I understand that was the intent. The intent was to put him into a chokehold, to hold him down until police could arrive and the police could resolve this situation. That was the intent. That's obvious from what we can see and from what witnesses have said. And that didn't happen because, in part, Mr. Neely was resisting for 15 minutes. Mr. Neely was fighting against them, and it took over 15 minutes for the police to actually show up because there are less police. Because defunding the police means that it takes longer for police to show up. I mean, it seems so obvious, I think, when you think about this. When you separate the propaganda, the talking heads, the emotion of saying, well, this must be racist, when it's obviously not. When you separate that crap out, it becomes very obvious what did happen. Let me go back to some of the comments here. Users Band says, well, hold on. Did the guy holding the legs vote for Biden? Who knows? I was told if you ain't black, if you didn't vote for Biden, maybe the black man in the video, he doesn't count. I mean, you've all seen the video. It's 3 men there holding down Mr. Neely as he struggles and fights against them. One of those individuals absolutely being black, a Hispanic recording the entire thing. But they don't count because that doesn't promote a message that is supposed to make you be in favor of BLM. That's supposed to put you in favor of the far left, to align you with Antifa, because their action is, okay, let's go out and riot. Let's burn down a building. Let's go and attack people because of the color of their skin. You have to obey critical race theory. See, it's white people are evil, black people are victims. So just give up because the government will take care of it all, even though that's not going to happen. I know. Dow says, well, soldiers are trained to kill. Yes, Marines are trained to kill. And I am sure that the Marine wasn't intending to do so, but I can also say as a Marine myself, that's not why I was trained. All the actions I were trained, all the things that they embedded in me were to kill. So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that it wound up being there. And I think it could have been avoided if we had the police, more police. If we didn't defund the police in New York City, there would have been more police to show up faster so that that gentleman, Mr. Neely, wouldn't be dead today. This is the consequences of having a progressive ideology. This is the consequences of passing progressive laws throughout New York State. This is the consequence of defunding both homelessness and mental health services. If you want to be angry about something, be angry about New York State and New York City, that they got rid of the police, that they got rid of the mental health services, that they got rid of the homeless services. That's where your anger should be. You should be upset with the progressives. You should be angry with the elected politicians who have failed both Jordan Neely and the public. You should be upset that they changed the legal system to allow Jordan Neely to be arrested 40 times, including for multiple assaults and having a warrant out for violent assault at the time of his death. But they're going to tell you, oh my God, but Mike, you can't say this. You're black. You have to agree that this was racial. No, no. Just because I'm black, just because I'm Hispanic, doesn't mean I have to blindly accept what some other group with a political agenda is telling me when my eyes can see what is happening, when I can look at the root causes and understand the problems involved. And you should and can too. We need to call this out for the manipulation that it is. Again, I am more than happy to hear from anyone who disagrees with me. Not just in the comments, but even to call in 607-242-9247. And I'm more than happy to hear you tell me, Mike, you just don't understand. Here's the answer. If you would like to try and explain to me somehow how this is, I don't know what the word would be, how this is justified. Well, justified from Mr. Neely's point of view, how the progressives have done the right thing, how reducing the number of police helped Mr. Neely. If you can tell me how releasing him over and over again as he commits more and more crimes and not providing him with mental health services, if you can tell me how that's been beneficial to him or anyone on the subway, I'd like to hear it. Subway crime is at it's back to the levels of 20 years ago. I believe it's increased by 20% in New York City. We're not helping anyone. And demonizing people because of the color of their skin or the fact that he was military isn't helping you. It's just that simple, folks. I really, really want to... I'm hoping and praying that someone on the left will come on and tell me how I'm wrong about this, how I've misunderstood this, how, no, this is a good thing. Because I don't see it. I don't see how this was beneficial to anyone. Maybe I'm missing something here. Because when I look at all of the news, when I listen to people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I want you to see what she had to say. This is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she said yesterday that Jordan Neely was murdered. That's not true because she's assigning intent. And we don't see that intent, and we don't know that intent. Unless the Marine walked up and said, I'm about to kill you, she can't say that. And as far as every witness has been provided, he never said that. So she doesn't know that, and she just committed slander. And matter of fact, because she put it in writing, it's libel, and she should be sued to hell and back. She's wrong. And she goes on to say, but because Jordan Neely was houseless, that's the new thing now. Now he's houseless. No, he's homeless. Don't change the words to try and make it sound nicer, to somehow try and give him a better impression in people's minds. He was homeless, not houseless. And crying for food, he didn't cry for food. He made a demand. He demanded food. In a time when the city is raising rents and stripping services. Why is the city raising rents? Because taxes are up? Because we're in a bad economy due to the decisions of the Biden-Harris administration? Because we're not energy independent? Because bad decisions were made throughout the entire COVID crisis and we didn't allow landlords to accept rents, and yet they still had to pay for the mortgages of their properties? The costs went up, and no one has been able to help that because we're seeing more and more people become unemployed because inflation is destroying the value of the money that we have. That's why rents are raising. And stripping services to militarize. The city is militarizing itself. How are they militarizing themselves when we have less police officers because of defunding the police, the very same thing that she supports? She goes on to say, while many in power demonize the poor, who's demonizing people for being poor? No one is demonizing anyone for being poor. But we're also not using the excuse that you may or may not be poor as giving you the right to go out and rob and to harm people, to commit muggings or violence, that's not an excuse. The murderer gets protected. Again, she says he's a murderer. You don't know the mindset. You weren't on there. And I know, AOC, you haven't been on a train at least since the day you got reelected. You're surrounded by security, and you don't travel on the subway. You have a SUV that drives you everywhere with your protection detail. You don't know what it's like to be on the subways anymore with the crime as it is. And it seems you've forgotten what it used to be like. And she's talking about, well, he's getting protected with passive headlines. Really? Let's think about that. The accuracy of the headlines is in question. Absolutely. But I find this to be upsetting in so many levels. Yes, user has been banned. Part of the reason why rents are up is because people didn't pay rents during the entire pandemic. And yet the costs kept coming. And someone had to pay. And inflation has helped to accelerate that. Look at what the government itself has told us. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has told us one of the highest things, the housing. Inflation has gone up across the country. These are economic problems created by the Biden-Harris administration that have hurt people and accelerated the problem. Again, it's the progressive policies. If nothing else you take from this, and I know it's a bit of a rant, but it needs to be said. We need to be honest with each other. This is all coming as a consequence of progressive policies. It has nothing to do with racism. And if you're trying to justify it under racism, if you're trying to excuse it as racism, if you're trying to tell me that this is a black lynching, you're brain dead. I hate to say it that simply, but to put it quite honestly, you're brain dead. He wasn't being hunted. He wasn't being lynched. If you're going to call this, everyone calls this a black lynching, do you understand the definition of the word lynching? Do you understand the environment in which lynchings existed and took place? Because apparently it seems you don't. And why can't we be honest about this? You can tell me that you are sad that Jordan Neely died. You can tell me that. And I can appreciate that you have sympathy and empathy for his death. I don't. Because it's a natural consequence of what he chose to do. He made a choice, not necessarily to be homeless, but to be criminal and to be a violent criminal. We cannot exclude that in understanding what happened. And if we're ever looking to solve this, we cannot exclude the root cause, his violence and his criminality. That's the problem. He didn't die because he was homeless. He didn't die because he was black. He didn't die because of his mental issues per se. He died because he's violent and he's a criminal. That's why he died. If you think I'm wrong, tell me why. I asked that of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I asked that of the Democrats that are trying to turn this away. I asked that of the far left and Antifa, BLM, the progressive leaders of tomorrow. I ask all these organizations, please explain to me. Give me your reasoning. And don't just say, well, he's black. I know that. The Young Turks couldn't get past that. That's the only thing that the Young Turks could talk about in this is that he's black. I mean, what else I want to go back to J.R. Jackson, who's sympathetic to the criminal, the aggressor, the man who said, I'm willing to die and go to prison for life just before this happened. Oh, you guys can't hear that. I'm sorry. I thought you could hear. Sounds like the sound isn't going through. You saw the video. Um, we have people like the Young Turks trying to excuse this, trying to push the manipulation of your emotions, to try and convince you of something that you can see isn't reality. And that's insulting. Over and over again, we are seeing the left. They have been searching for a martyr. They have been searching for someone that they could put up right next to George Floyd so that you will give them more power. That's what, at the end of the day, that's what's really happening here. That's what this really is about. BLM doesn't care about Jordan Neely. The Young Turks don't care about Jordan Neely, whether he lived or died. No, they're concerned about power. That's what this is all about. This is about giving the progressives more power, that you obey what they feel like they should have, to give them your rights and your freedoms. That's what this truly, I believe, is truly about. Yeah, I saw afterwards that the audio cut out. I don't know why. Could be because of the Young Turks messing with me. Fair enough. But this is the problem. That they are trying to, I truly believe, this is all about power. This is a power play. Because BLM tried in 2020, tried to create an autonomous zone in Brooklyn. They tried to convince the people of New York City to burn down their apartments, their businesses, where they work, where they live. And it failed. They tried to take power, and it failed. They did get through bail reform. They did get social justice in New York City, and that resulted in more crime. And then they said, let's defund the police, and they forced out police officers, and they elected a practical progressive, Eric Adams, as mayor. So they got several wins, and the people, the rest of the public, got more crime, and they became more victims. That didn't help anyone, but it gave them more power. But they needed more. They needed another symbol. They need to put up another saint. They are going to turn Jordan Neely into a saint right next to George Floyd, a violent criminal, a violent repeat offender, a drug dealer, someone who is helping to poison our children and our neighborhoods. And they want you to feel bad about that. I don't feel bad that George Floyd died. I don't feel bad that Jordan Neely died. They made choices in their life to be violent and to be criminals. The natural consequence of being violent and a criminal is your life is most likely going to end a lot sooner than if you weren't a violent criminal. And what are they going to tell you? Well, Michael Vos, he has to be a racist. It has to be. Because there could be no other answer. Which is the furthest thing from the truth. Furthest thing from the truth. But they have to make you believe that. They have to try and punish people who speak out and say that this isn't reality. That the crime isn't what we saw, but what led to it. Truly, the thing that caused this crime is the progressive policies and the ideology. It starts with critical race theory. White people are evil, black people are victims, and the only one who can resolve that is the government, political organizations, a political agenda. If you believe that, you have already given up your rights and your freedoms. You're a slave. And then they reinforce that, trying to pick apart things that are happening in our society as it is crumbling, as it is falling down. And they're editing it, selectively editing the things that you are seeing, the things that they are saying, so that you will agree with that. Remember when we had the shooting down in Alabama, the Sweet 16 shooting that was dropped out of the news? They were telling you, oh, well, that's because of that's just guns. It's firearms. It's because of rifles and automatic weapons, assault weapons. And then they dropped the story because every single person involved with the Sweet 16 shooting in Alabama were black. It was a gang act of gang violence. That teenagers as young as 15 were involved, something that is criminal in every single state, and not one piece of gun control legislation would have ever stopped it. What about the 3 teenagers who died in Florida because a 12-year-old was involved with a gang that decided to kill those 3 teenagers? A 12-year-old, which is illegal. Gun control completely failed. So they dropped the story. What about in Tennessee, the trans shooter who, as far as we can tell, committed those murders, killed 3 9-year-old children because they were unhappy with their life. They had been sold a bill of goods from the progressives saying, if you transform yourself, then you will be happy. And that was a lie. And the only way out for the trans shooter, that trans shooter thought, was to commit suicide by cop. And that story had to be thrown away as well, because it shows you the reality of the consequences when you follow the progressive ideology to the letter. When you just blanket affirm people, when you just obey what progressives have told you and give up your rights, your freedoms, your choices, and just do what they feel at any given moment. And in case after case, each and every time, what do we see? That people, innocent people, get hurt. Hello, Hal. Hal says they dropped the story because that's how it works anymore. If a story lasts 3 days in the news cycle, that's an eternity in 2023. I don't think it's just a news cycle. It's because they know that if they keep focusing on it, well, the next thing you're going to find out is a progressive policy failed, and that caused it. Look at what happened with Francisco Oropeza. Francisco Oropeza, that story is basically out of the headlines. The last thing we heard about a day ago, and it's already gone now, you don't see this being talked about anymore. He got caught. His wife was hiding him in a closet. He's an illegal alien. What was the root cause of Francisco Oropeza killing 5 people, including a 8-year-old child? The root cause wasn't the firearm that he used. It's because he entered America illegally at least 4 separate times. This was the 5th time he was in America illegally. The open border was the reason why he committed that crime. If our border was closed, he would never have come into America. That family would still be alive today. That 8-year-old would still be alive today if we had a closed border. If we did not just openly allow 5.5 million illegal aliens into America. That's irrefutable. That's the root problem. What's the root problem in talking about Jordan Neely? Again, I said it again and again, and let me say it one more time. It isn't because he was black. It wasn't even because he was homeless. It's because he was a violent, repeat criminal. That's why. He died as a consequence of that, and the fact that progressive policies have made it possible. They took away the police. And when you defund the police, it's not just that there's less police officers. It means it's going to take them longer to get to where they need to be to help you in the public, which will cost people's lives. There is more crime because in part because there are less police officers, so it's harder to stop crime. That is the consequence of progressive policies. We have bail reform that are letting these criminals come back out into the public to harm more people. We have social justice, which is editing the law based on the color of someone's skin, allowing some criminals to come back out and to commit more crimes. We're not punishing the criminals anymore. These are progressive policies. At the same time, they have killed the mental health funding. They have killed the homeless funding because they're too busy telling you that climate change is the biggest threat to your life. And they're taking all the money that they could put into mental health, all the money that they could be putting into homelessness, all the money that they could be putting into feeding kids, all the money they could put into securing the border, the money that they could be using to pay for police officers, and they're putting it into climate change, which will not work. Because China doesn't care, because India doesn't care, because Africa doesn't care about climate change, and they're committing more greenhouse gases while America leads the world in reducing climate change. Again, I will say it, and I've said it before on this channel. America is not a problem. Climate change isn't the problem of America. We've already reduced more than all of Europe and the United Kingdom combined. It's not our problem. We're not the problem of this. We are a solution, and we're doing the best out of everyone in the world. Climate change isn't the issue. But they're taking all the money that we could be using to fix other problems and putting it into climate change because you're distracted, because you're afraid, because they've convinced you that the root problem is whether or not it's going to rain tomorrow, rather than dealing with some of these people need to be in jail for a long time, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their lifestyle. Now the new thing is, well, you have to feel bad for Jordan Neely because his mom died horribly. And that is sad, which has nothing to do with the fact that Jordan Neely chose to be a violent criminal. Lots of people's moms die, some of them because of violence. And it is sad, and it is something we should try to stop. But they don't become repeat violent criminals. You can't say that. So that's not a one-to-one connection. That's just emotional manipulation. You want me to feel bad that he made a choice to become a violent criminal because his mom died. That was his choice. You want me to feel bad because he was homeless. I've been homeless. I'm black. I'm Hispanic. I didn't commit violent crimes. I didn't get arrested 40 times for violent crimes. That's a choice. And I'm supposed to feel bad because he made a choice to be a criminal, a violent criminal? I'm sorry, no. So let me go back to some of the comments here. And Born Blondie, I will get there. I love this. Born Blondie is telling me you're making stuff up. What have I said that isn't confirmed? Everything I have said, I have confirmed with the Independent. And again, let me show you so that you can see, because maybe you didn't see the whole show. This is the news coming from the Independent. I've shown what's being said by the New York Times. I'm showing what's being said by the Young Turks. This is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. After I'm done with the show, I will have the links for everything I've just described, and it will be in the comments. So if you want to tell me, Mike, you're lying, okay, fantastic. Where is anything that I've said not true? I've been homeless. I am an advocate for homelessness. Been doing it for well over a decade. I understand what it is to be homeless. No, I didn't say he was violent 40 times. I said that he's been arrested 40 times, which is true. He has been arrested at least 4 times for committing violence. And he had a warrant out for his arrest for being violent. I can't tell you why he wasn't. Actually, I believe he was convicted. I don't have that answer. The news media won't talk about it. Maybe we should have that conversation. We should have that conversation. So, Born Blondie, I didn't lie. You misunderstood what I said. But I'm trying to be as clear as I can. And you're focusing on, well, see, you're saying that he was violent all the time. I didn't say he was violent all the time. No. Just because you're homeless doesn't mean you get arrested. I've been homeless, Born Blondie. And I have lived in New York City. I grew up in New York City. I spent the first 18 years of my life, actually 20 years of my life, in New York City. I go back on a regular basis. My family's from there. I was born in the Bronx. I was there from the 1968 until after, 1988, 1990s when I left New York City. No, you don't get, no, most people don't get arrested for sleeping on the trains. Okay? So I do know New York City. And I've lived in New York City. And I've seen the crime in New York City. I'm very familiar with that. I've been homeless. I'm familiar with that. He was violent. He's a violent repeat criminal. That's a fact. You cannot change that. And that is a choice. That was his choice. You cannot change that. Even if he, you know what? I will give you, let's go with that Born Blondie. I'm not saying you can't get arrested for eating and pissing and smoking on a train. Those are all crimes. Absolutely. And you should be arrested for that because that is a crime. Okay? So even if, let's go with your thinking right now. He wasn't arrested just because he was homeless. He didn't die because he was homeless. He died because he's a violent person. And the consequence of being a violent criminal very often is an early death. Yes, he's a human being. And I'm not saying that he deserved to die. I have never said he deserved to die. I'm saying it's a natural consequence of being a violent criminal. And I have seen that throughout my entire life. You may not be familiar with the Boston Road crew. I do. I remember the gangs when I grew up. I knew them. I knew them. They were my classmates. They were the brothers and sisters of my classmates. I've seen what violence has done. I've seen what drugs have done in my neighborhood as I grew up. Now you want to say, oh, well, he attacked someone. He attacked several people. He's a violent criminal. He walked in threatening people with more violence. He was confronted. That was his choices. He died because of those choices. You may not like that, but I don't care about whether you like it or not. This isn't about whether you feel good about it. Okay? I'm not telling you that you should be happy that he's dead. I'm telling you that I don't care that he's dead because of the consequences. It's a natural consequence. I don't have to cry because he died. But I can tell you, it's not racist. It's not a lynching. And yes, Blondie, he did. Oh, excuse me. Blondie, he did threaten people. Again, let's go back to the New York Times. The New York Times reports, hostile and erratic. He said, and I quote, "I don't mind going to jail and getting life in prison. I'm ready to die." That's a threat. That's a threat. You may not think that that's threatening. I do. Whether I'm empathetic or compassionate is meaningless. That has nothing to do with resolving this. It doesn't, whether I have empathy for Jordan Neely or George Floyd does not excuse the crimes that they committed or the reasons why they became a threat. And you may not feel that's a threat, Blondie. I do. I do. So you may not have felt that was threatening. That doesn't mean everyone doesn't think that. I do feel that it's a threat. And so someone else who felt it was threatening, and it sounds like, and from all reports in the news media, people felt threatened. They felt like they were about to be victims of violence. Now, you may say, well, the Marine overreacted. That's one thing. But you can't say, well, it was absolutely peaceful and no one felt threatened at all, because that's not what's being reported in the news media by all of the left-leaning news media. So you can't tell me, and I didn't say he deserved to die. Again, you're putting words in my mouth. Because he threatened people, yes, he caused a situation that led to his death. Because he's a violent criminal, we have every reason to believe, and yes, they didn't know that at the time, but we know it now. He's a violent repeat criminal. And I'm telling you that the cause of him in that situation is the fact that we did not arrest him and keep him in prison. I'm telling you that the reason why he's a problem is because he should have been in jail or in a mental institution. And I believe that progressive policies like bail reform, like social justice, and reducing the penalties of a crime based on someone's skin color are parts of the problem. I think that blaming this on racism and calling it a black lynching is creating more of a division and causing more harm to the public. I believe that not having enough police officers because of defunding the police and making it take over 15 minutes for the police to get on the scene to resolve this led to his death. Progressive policies did this to him, his choices, and the police. No, you can't say he had a mental breakdown. You weren't in his mind. You don't know if he had a mental breakdown. We don't know that. Now you're making an assumption, Blondie. You're making an assumption that is not backed up by the fact that many witnesses have said that he has been having the same pattern of violence and threats to people on the F train for weeks, if not months, if not years. Yeah, he choked him for 15 minutes. Yes. And? No, Blondie, it's not clear that it's mental. By the way, Blondie, I'm perfectly happy. And again, I'm trying to respectfully respond to you. I don't agree with you, but I'm respectfully listening to you. I'm asking you, you can call into 607-242-9247. Rather than typing it out, I am more than happy to hear you and we can talk about this. Okay? And again, I don't want you to feel like you're being persecuted. You're not. We can have a disagreement. In fact, that's why I'm having this video, to have this conversation. And I want to be clear on all of the aspects, and I want you to be understood clearly. So I'm asking you, call in 607. Yep, the phone line's on. I just checked it. And I'm not saying you're not being respectful. Blondie, I'm not saying you're not being respectful. I'm saying let's have the conversation. Call in 607-242-9247 so that you can speak and you will be heard and we can have this conversation. I'm not saying that you have to agree. I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to point out the root cause, and I believe a solution is dealing with the progressive policies that I believe are causing this, that are helping this to happen more often and taking advantage of people. That this is an aspect of manipulation emotionally. That's what I stand at, and that's what I'm speaking about. And I think this is a direct consequence of those policies and the choices made by Jordan Neely. Again, I'm not gonna ask you your name. This isn't a trick. I'm asking you to call in because you can speak faster than you can type, and we can have this conversation. I'm not saying he didn't have a mental illness. I've never said he didn't have mental illness. I'm not saying that he didn't make choices. I am saying that he's a violent criminal who had an arrest warrant for his violence. He has a history on the F train of committing violence, of threatening people, intimidating people. And we don't know if all the people on the train, because the news media will not report this, but it appears based on other social media that many people have seen him on that same train doing the same thing, being aggressive and attacking people. And you don't know if people have seen him do this and had fear for their lives. We don't know. No one's asked that question of the witnesses yet. But what we can say is this has nothing to being white, black, or yellow, which we are hearing from BLM and from progressive activists. They're trying to make this racial. It's not. They're trying to tell you that the answer to this is bail reform, that the answer to this is social justice and defunding the police. And that's not true. We're hearing from people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who are telling us that this is straight up murder, which is a lie. There is no proof of that. There's nothing to make us think that she's trying to use emotions to promote her political agenda. And that's my problem. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because I guarantee you, if we had more police, they would have shown up sooner, he'd probably still be alive. If we had him in jail, he'd be getting mental help and he would be unable to threaten the public and he'd be alive. If we didn't reduce sentences and have bail reform, he'd be in jail, people would be safe. So you've seen him, okay. And again, I'm really asking you to call in, Blondie. I'm asking you to call in so that I can understand this. You said you have seen him. He never attacked anyone that you saw. And he was asking for money. Fantastic. He's a beggar as well. I'm not questioning that. Just because you never saw him attack anyone doesn't change the fact that he's been arrested for attacking people, that he had a warrant for attacking people. So he has attacked people. Didn't attack you, but others. Is it manslaughter? Maybe. A man died. It doesn't seem like that was the intention, but if you listen to the left in New York City and around this nation, their answer right now is that it was racial, it was a black lynching. That's what Al Sharpton's saying. That's what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said. And so that's part of the problem right now, because there are people who are being manipulated and we're turning away from what's the root cause. And Blondie, I'm asking you, the root cause I have suggested is that defunding the police, that having bail reform and having social justice are part of the problem. That's the problem. Those are the root problems. And if we resolve those and take the money away from climate change and put it back into our cities, into our states, into our nation, so that we can fund mental health, so we can fund homelessness, we'd be better off. Yes, we're talking about why he was killed. And I'm telling you, those are the reasons why he was killed. And not one of them is about his race. Not one of them is because he was homeless. He didn't die because he was homeless. So we agree. I think you agree with my premise. That's the root problem. And that's why, but that's not what we're hearing in the news media. And that's my issue. The media is trying, and certain politicians like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are trying to turn this into a race issue. They're trying to turn this into a progressive politics issue. And that will harm people. Because this is just one example of what is happening, not just in New York City, but across this country. And it is happening more and more because we have less police, we have less funding for mental health, we have less funding for the homeless, and we have more people who are trying to create autonomous zones and insurrectionist zones and create riots and arson and murder to push a political agenda. And if we do not call that out for what it is, the situation will only become worse, and we will see this and other events that will happen more often. Do you understand my position, Blondie? I'm not telling you to agree with me. I'm asking you, do you understand me? And again, you can call in, but do you understand what I am saying? And by the way, folks, I know I'm not reading through what Blondie has been saying. Essentially, Blondie has been explaining how he died. And I am explaining why he died. We don't necessarily disagree with each other, although we don't necessarily agree. So the most recent thing Blondie is saying, and I'm sorry, people who are watching this can see the comments on the screen as we're going. Blondie says, there is no respect, no compassion, no love. That man was killed and people are like, good. That's mentally damaging. I'll address that in 1 second. Blondie goes on to say, I understand the point that I have raised, and yes, agrees with the points I'm raising. Let me address the thing you just said. There's no respect, no compassion, no love. I disagree with that. Because I am hearing people say he was killed, and no one's saying that it's good. I believe people are saying he died as a consequence of his choices. And neither that it is good or bad, it's understandable. It is a natural consequence. And to assign good or bad to that, yeah, that's upsetting, but here's the thing. It isn't good or bad that he died. It's just the consequence of the life he chose. He chose to be violent. He chose to be a criminal. And as a consequence of those choices, he wound up shortening his life. Had he not been a criminal, had he not been violent and a criminal, he'd be alive. Now, you may disagree with that. That's fantastic. But I can tell you, as someone who has been homeless, and you may have not seen this before, Blondie. So let me show you. This is just one example of well over 5 years of me being an advocate for the homeless. I spent year after year after year. I go out and I am an advocate for the homeless. Speak at SUNY Broome. I've spoken at Binghamton University. I've spoken on the YouTube and the internet. I've told people about how I've been homeless and what I experienced. Homelessness is not the cause of why he died. It's not the cause of him being violent, nor is it the cause of him being a criminal. Those aren't, so he didn't die because he was homeless. He didn't die because he was black. You're saying that's not true, and you disagree with this. Which part do you disagree with? That because he's homeless, that means he must be violent, and that means that he must be a criminal? And this is why I'm asking you to call in. Because if I'm misunderstanding you, I want to make sure I do understand your argument. He died because they assumed he was going to get violent. Because people are aware of him being violent. Because he has a history, not just of arrests, but people experience him being violent. They didn't see him the day before. You can't say that, Blondie. Maybe they did. I didn't say he's always violent. I didn't say he was 100% violent every time. He doesn't need to be. If I saw him being violent once, if I have been told by other people in that subway car the moment he showed up that they said the last time they saw him, he was violent, that he got into a fight on a subway car because someone didn't give him money or food, that's all you need. You don't know the conversation that happened that moment. And I'm not saying he has to be violent every time, but he was someone with a history of violence. No, they didn't see his criminal record, but many people saw him on the F train. Many of them seen him violent on the F train. How do they know? Because it's not the first time he's ever been violent on the F train. That's how they know. Because witnesses have said, and we have seen this over and over again, it wasn't the first time. This wasn't the first time that he's ever been on an F train and asking people for money and saying that he wants to go to prison, that he wants to go into jail for life. I didn't say he just rode that train. Again, I didn't say that. I didn't say he just rode the F train. I said that people have stated over and over again on the internet, outside of the major news media who won't ask them this question, go to Reddit. You can look it up on Reddit. People have been saying on social media, and again, I'm going by what has been put out there. The news media have not asked anyone, have they ever seen him been violent before? But we do know, both from his record and from what people have said in social media, that he is a repeat violent individual. So there is a reason why people would have an offense. Even separate of that, let me throw out his history. Let's go with what he said according to the New York Times. I don't mind going to jail. He is yelling, I don't mind going to jail and getting life in prison. I'm ready to die. That is a statement of violence. You don't go to prison for life because someone gave you some food. You don't go to prison for life for begging for money. You don't even go to prison for stealing someone's wallet, no matter how much money's in there. You go to prison for life for dealing drugs and killing people. That is a statement saying, when he says, and again, I'm quoting the New York Times, I don't mind going to jail. He's shouting, I don't mind going to jail and getting life in prison. I'm ready to die. That is a statement of violence. That is a statement of an intent to harm. Whether or not the reaction, the fact that the reaction to that led to his death, that's a different question. Whether or not he should have been in a chokehold for 5 minutes or 7 minutes or 15, that's a different thing. The inciting incident that led to his death that day was a statement of violence. Where does it say that? I'm showing it on the screen right now. This is the New York Times. Subway rider choked homeless man to death, medical examiner rules. This was published on May 4th, 2023 at 12:41 p.m. And you have to go down and search through the entire article. And in the middle, they have the statements from the witnesses. This is the New York Times. Do you dispute the New York Times? Do you believe the New York Times is not credible? Sean Maid has joined in. Hello. Rest in peace, Jordan Neely. I used to watch his videos years ago, where those a verbal confrontation means choking him to death is okay. No one's talking about whether or not he was Michael Jackson. He wasn't arrested because he was Michael Jackson. He wasn't in this confrontation because he was being Michael Jackson. So Sean, that doesn't matter. That's not it. And Sean, no, the only thing he did wasn't just throwing down his jacket. It was him saying and making a threat, as stated by, again, in the New York Times, from the witnesses, that gave the impression he was going to be violent. So, there it is. So, you want to tell me about being Michael Jackson? Don't care. Has nothing to do with what he did now. What we do know, and what led to his death, is a violent confrontation. He made a statement of violence, of impending violence, that he was being threatening. Whether or not you agree with that, others can and did. Because what his statement implies is violence. Because let me say it again. When you say, I'm willing to go to jail and die, you're not saying that because someone's going to give you food. That's not because you stole someone's wallet. You don't go to jail and you don't die for taking food or for begging for food, begging for money, or even stealing. Even having a violent confrontation doesn't mean you go to jail and you die. It is a statement that implies he is going to do something ultra violent. In an environment where we have seen crime rise by 20%, we have less police, and we have more people who are turning around because of progressive ideology. Bail reform is releasing them immediately, and we have prosecutors in New York State that are willing to lessen, if not remove, the penalty of crime based on someone's color of skin. That's the problem. That's the issue. And if we resolve that, we stop having these incidents. Let me make that clear again. You can feel bad for the fact that he died. No, that doesn't mean asking for money, asking for food doesn't mean you're mentally ill. Throwing your jacket down doesn't mean you're mentally ill. Being homeless doesn't mean you're mentally ill. I've been homeless. I've never been mentally ill. That is not being mentally ill. And watching that does not mean that he is necessarily mentally ill. You're making an assumption there. What it does mean, what we do know is he was making a threat. And when you make the threat, I'm not going to assume that you're mentally ill just because you make a threat. I do think you're going to be, if you're making a violent threat, I assume not that you're mentally ill, but that I need to protect myself. Again, the root problem isn't his mental illness. The root problem isn't the fact that he's black. The root problem isn't that he was, it is because he's violent. He chose to be a criminal. And the system, the progressive ideology, is giving him an excuse. No, ranting and throwing down, he wasn't ranting. He made a statement of threat, of violence. He made a threat of violence. That's not ranting. There's a difference. Saying that you don't like white people or you don't like black people, saying that you think the mayor is an idiot or you hate the president, that's ranting. Screaming it at the top of your lungs, fantastic. That's ranting. Talking about the little green men that are your best buddy as you hang out on the subway at the end of the night, that may be mental. Throwing down your jacket isn't a sign of mental illness. Homelessness is not mental illness. Yes, I'm saying that Sean Maid is making the statement that, well, because he threw down his jacket, he's being mentally ill. Well, let's hear. I have a call coming in. Hello, and thank you for joining the show. If you wish, can you tell me what's your first name? Can you can you hear me? Do you hear us on there? Hang on one second. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, there you
Can
go.
you hear?
Yeah, it was connected, but some reason it was being quiet. Go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm just, Liz, I just kind of just dropped in. I was listening to the conversation about the situation there. Um, you know, I my biggest thing was is that when I heard what AOC, said, it just was extremely infuriating, you know. Considering the fact that every single one of the policies and basically the situation that was at hand, I blame completely on the policies that are being implemented in New York City by Democrats, and the perpetual state that this that happens here, with this guy continually being arrested, continually harassing, continually, ending up in a situation where nobody was taking him, out of the situation to prevent this from happening again. It just drove me nuts. Um, and the fact now is you got somebody who had, in my opinion, had no choice but to take the action, at hand that he did. And unfortunately, what happened, but it wasn't his fault. It was basically, if you want to blame somebody, you can blame the people who created the system that allowed this person to continue to roam and unfortunately behave the way he did. Now, a lot of people would say, well, this person, maybe he, did have a lot of choices and he made a lot of wrong choices, or they could say, well, he didn't have any choices because he was, crazy. Either way, though, is that we have a failure of a system that let this situation happen. Either he could have been a numerous number of things that could have been taken care of, by the city, but like again, it was Democrat policy in New York City. I believe that was totally responsible for this situation to get out to happen the way it did.
All right. So you agree with me that the root cause was the fact, besides him being a violent criminal, it's
Yep.
because of defunding the police. It's because of taking away funding for mental health services and homeless services. That it's because of social justice and bail reform. That's what I believe. Do you agree with those, or do you think I'm wrong on that?
No, those policies definitely are it, But when you want to say that, there wasn't enough money going to a certain program, I think it's a load of crap because the most efficient and effective programs that could have been implemented, if implemented properly, would not cost as much money as the way that the Democrats want to do things. Because, well, like you were saying, if you want to have their bail reform, it's costing, millions, if not, half a bit. I actually would say billions of dollars, actually, probably with property damage and everything else that comes across, with this policy, and all the extra work. So, yeah, I mean, it's just it's a pretty major thing. Again, yeah. So the policies themselves that were implemented, by the Democrats. Again, yeah, this is a policy problem, and it's in their hands. They can blame anybody they want. And again, AOC wants to turn this into a George Floyd situation, and turn it into a racist situation, and you know, saying that this guy was just a vigilante who just took actions upon his own and just wanted to prey on some poor, hopeless, guy that likes to do Michael Jackson impressions, on the subway. I mean that's the picture she wants to paint.
Hmm. I, I I understand what Blondie is saying. I understand what Sean is saying, and I'm not. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying that they're bad people or that they have an opinion that is worthless. I'm not saying that at all. I disagree. And I disagree vehemently, and I don't hear the argument they're making. I don't believe is correct because it does not deal with the root cause of what caused this man to die, and what we can do to resolve it. I believe, and maybe misunderstanding him, and I
Well,
believe Sean is going to call in once you're off to try and
yeah. Well,
clarify.
well, that's the thing is that the big question is that I mean, if you're it's like you want to have a hands-off approach to every situation, and have no confrontation. And we know the way that usually ends. It ends with somebody, getting seriously injured by somebody like this. And so, really, I mean, look at all decisions and everything, choices that you make, there's always a trade-off. And the bottom line is that if he didn't take this, take and get a hold of this person the way that he did, then the trade-off would have been that, it would have escalated into somebody getting seriously injured, by him. And, and quite honestly, he would have, and if he didn't die, which is unfortunate, because of the way the system is, and because they're not going to arrest him, and they're not going to take him in, they're not going to actually fix this problem and prevent it from happening in the future, he would behave in the same manner until somebody gets seriously injured, And not to mention the reports that, I mean, I can't verify, but I mean, you hear about reports that this guy was attempting to push people, right in front of the subway, And even if this guy wasn't pushing people in front of the subway, we do know there are many people with mental health problems in New York City who are doing that and are not being taken off the street because of the policies that the Democrats are implementing in New York City. So, look, it's a very dangerous place, and there's unfortunately people are being put in situations where they have to make choices that nobody should have to make. I mean, the law should be pretty exact. And, this situation with the mental health shouldn't be it. And when people want to say, oh, yeah, no, it's Republicans want to defund this, want to defund that. No, it's not. It's basically there's a liberal, mindset that just allows everybody to do what they want when they want. And if you want to park a tent on the corner of, Glenwood and Main Street in Bennington, you can go do so every Sunday and beg for as much money as you want, because guess what? Nobody's going to stop you from doing it.
Well, they would arrest you. They should arrest you because vagrancy and panhandling are crimes. That's fine. But the problem is, prosecutors in New York State are told that we should allow panhandling and vagrancy because of social justice. And that's
Yeah.
a problem. We don't have enough police officers to deal with vagrancy and panhandling. And so they have to go to higher levels of crime because there's fewer police officers. And it takes them longer to deal with other issues before they can get to the situation you need them at. And so defunding the police is part of the problem. Again, I see the root of this is in why this man, Jordan Neely, died. And so far, even the people who are disagreeing with me in part do not disagree that this has nothing to do with race, which means people like AOC, Al Sharpton, and many of the news media out there are pushing the race because they're race baiting. And they race bait to get political points, to push an agenda, a political agenda. And BLM is taking advantage of that. Antifa are taking advantage of that. I don't think anyone's disagreeing with that.
No, it's very easy.
One of them, Sean, and by the way, 1 second, Jason. Sean, you just said he meant to kill him. You're saying what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said. 1, that's a crime. 2, I disagree because you can't prove that. You aren't in his mind. You aren't in that situation. You can't say that.
Let me say something about if he meant to kill, because I can tell you one thing. The guy was a Marine. If the guy wanted to basically crush his windpipe, he could have done so. The hold that he used was compression on the arteries in the side of your neck.
I'm a Marine.
Which basically,
no, I'm sorry. No. There's a silly statement being made that just before you go further, I am a Marine. Okay, so it's saying he's a Marine, so he killed him. That's crap. I'm a Marine, so you can't say that. All right, you're now jumping to conclusions, Sean. Jason, I want you to go on. Yes, he was using a hold improperly. Let's be clear here. He was improperly holding him in a chokehold. And that did lead to his death. That's correct. And he did that on purpose.
Improperly, no. It wasn't even improperly. The guy just died because, he just, he just knocked him out. And he didn't choke him by cutting the air off him. It wasn't a windpipe. He didn't crush his windpipe. The guy was not
suffocated. He suffocated in this. No, the coroner came out and said it was because of suffocation.
Oh, they already came out and said
compression, suffocation. Yes, that came out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. I thought that, because I mean, I was going to say, so did he crush his windpipe?
No.
Okay. Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, so there is a case to be made for unintentional manslaughter. Absolutely. There is a case for that. I'm not saying that there isn't. I'm not saying that necessarily the Marine should go scot free, although I believe in that situation, yes, because there was no intent to kill. Although you can still be arrested and you can still be charged, even if you don't intend to kill someone and they die. But to say it's murder and intentional, totally different thing. That's incorrect. And to especially accuse them of that at this point, when you weren't on the scene and you're not in that person's mind, is a crime. And that's wrong. That's what AOC has done, and I think she's wrong. And we know that she's manipulating the situation because she's making it about race. Same as the people who say it's black lynching. Same thing like Al Sharpton. They're using this for a political agenda. And I think that's muddying the waters, and that's one of the biggest problems in this. Do you think I'm wrong?
They're definitely using it for political, gain. They're going to, they're going to analyze the situation even more, you know. But again, I think that, I don't know. I mean, part of me is starting to scratch my head and wonder whether or not, the asphyxiation was caused by, another, guy that had, large quantities of fentanyl in the system. And it basically didn't take much to cut circulation off him because, again, you got another situation where you got a guy ODing on fentanyl or some,
Well,
restrictive thing.
a toxicology report has not been done yet. We don't know if drugs were in the system or not.
Yeah, so we don't know that yet.
We don't know that yet. That has not been reported yet.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, but then again, like I said, I don't know. I mean, look, see, the problem is now you just got a regular civilian, going out there, and now we're questioning, deadly physical force with somebody who, um, who's not a police officer, just a guy out there basically trying to defend, himself and everybody else that's on the freaking train, and it's just like I don't know what what people would think. I mean I mean, we all saw the video. I mean, the instant the guy, the guy says, okay, he's no longer, he's not moving. And all of a sudden he's just stopped. The guy just let go. And, the guy was basically dead at that point. It was kind of like, boom, boom, Um, so I don't know.
All right. Well,
But
let me do this because Sean seems
yep.
itching ready to call in, and he
Okay.
disagrees with me. So I want to give him a chance to speak as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Well, all right. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Thank you,
Yeah, bye.
Sean. Jason has been kind enough to get off the phone to give you an opportunity to call in. On the channel, everyone has a voice. I will be happy to hear whatever you have to say, as long as it is respectful and as long as you have a conversation with me. If you're screaming, if you insult me, if you make a personal attack against me, the call will end. But as long as we're personal, I don't mind that you can disagree with me, absolutely. But let's have the conversation. You wanted the phone number? It's 607-242-9247. It's scrolling on top of the screen. I also put it into the comments. I'm more than happy to hear your voice. You can call in right now. Jason got off the line just so that you can call in. 607-242-9247. Also to Blondie, who born Blondie was commenting before. Again, I reiterate, I'm happy to hear your voice. Because there's certain things that we absolutely agree with. There are certain things we don't. Let's have the conversation about the things we don't agree with. Because maybe when the politicians are watching this video, and I have many politicians in Congress, in New York State, at various levels of legislature and across this country, this is a conversation they need to hear. Not just BLM screaming that this is racial, or AOC and Al Sharpton trying to get political points off of this. They need to hear what real people are saying. So, Sean, I'm waiting for your call. I'm happy to hear your voice. By the way, the man is a Marine. It's not so-called. He is a Marine. That is a fact. And just because a Marine puts you in a chokehold doesn't mean they're committing murder. That's a lie. That's incorrect. So that's another thing. And the fact that you're saying he needs to be made an example of can be problematic depending on what you mean about that. Because is he being made an example of progressive politics? Is he being made an example of racial social justice? Or is he being made an example of because of being potentially a vigilante, of taking the law into his own hands? There are differences there. I want to hear which one you're talking about. Sean, you said you wanted the phone number. I gave it to you. You said you wanted to call in. Call in. Are you still there? I mean, I got Jason off the phone early just to make sure that you could call in, because you've been typing a lot. So this is your opportunity to speak to me. And I'm happy to hear your voice, because there are points that we agree about, just like with Blondie. But there are points that we don't agree about, and I think those are critical. The cause is the key. If we want to resolve this in the future, we need to have this conversation. The public needs to have this conversation, because the problem isn't homelessness, which you've mentioned that, well, he has to obviously be homeless because he has to have a mental issue because he's homeless, which I disagree with. Sean, you said you were homeless as a teenager. I was homeless in my 20s. We can have this conversation, because I assume you don't have a mental illness. I don't have a mental illness. Homelessness doesn't equal mental illness. Hello, and thank you for calling in. This is No Soundbites Allowed, your host. May I ask, what is your first name? Can you hear me on the line? Can you hear me on the line? Because we were just getting a call. You should be able to be heard. Are you there?
I'm not gonna say he
Oh, there
wasn't,
you
because
go.
if you follow this guy,
One moment.
there's tons of videos
Sir,
of him harangued
sir,
the same way he
one
did
moment.
when he was killed.
Sir, one
Yes,
moment.
killed. He was
One
killed.
moment.
And
One
another
moment.
thing, you
Hear
say
me
this
out.
guy who's, if you're a Marine,
Sir,
you should
sir,
you should know.
Sir,
Yeah.
for one moment, please give me a moment, because the phone did not pick up immediately. So let me restate what I started with. I will hear you out. First is, may I ask, what is your first name?
Sean.
Sean. Okay. Are you the Sean that was typing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Fantastic. Sean, one other question. Do you live in New York City?
No, I do not.
That's fine. I just wanted to establish that. Now, we've been having several comments. I'm happy to hear what you have to say. Again, the only rules on this channel, well, no vulgarity, please, because I want people to see this. Second thing is, as long as we're respectful, we can have this conversation. Go right ahead.
Okay, yeah. No profanity, none of that. I understand.
Fair enough. Go right ahead.
Okay, so you said that you don't think the guy was mentally ill. I mean...
No, I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying homelessness does not automatically equate to mental illness.
And you say you say you're a Marine. Okay, as a Marine, you don't think there was other methods to subdue the guy without killing him? And another thing, as a Marine, you should know when you put someone in a chokehold, how long can they go without air before you kill someone?
Okay, so let me answer.
So you say you figured a guy. You say you figured a guy didn't. Okay.
No. Let me answer your question. So, one, yes, I am a Marine. Two, to answer your question about were there other ways to subdue him? Apparently not, because it took 3 people, not one. It took
As a Marine,
people.
you could say that the only way to subdue him was a chokehold.
Wait a minute. I didn't get there. What I'm saying is that what we know for a fact, as shown in the video, it took 3 people to subdue Jordan Neely. That's a fact. So one of the more effective ways to do that is a chokehold if it's done properly, which may not be the case from what we can see in the video, because he didn't immediately get knocked out. Still, It did help to restrict him, and it took 3 people to restrict him, including a black man. Not saying that you're bringing that, but the media leaves out a black man, white man, and a Hispanic were all involved in this. This is not racial. I'm not saying you say that. I'm putting it out there to make sure the media is misrepresenting that. So to answer your question, one, was the chokehold necessary? Possibly. It is one of several ways to subdue someone, especially when that person is resisting and it takes 3 people to subdue them. Second question, how long can you have someone in a chokehold? Depends on how the chokehold is being applied. If the person passes out immediately, it can be as simple as 30 seconds to a minute. If the person is not applying it properly, or depending on how the person is resisting, it can take several minutes. Should he have been in the chokehold for 15 minutes? Maybe not. But he didn't die in the first 15 minutes. He died after that.
Okay, so another thing, clearly if you look at the video, you can see once he put him in the chokehold, he basically had the best of the guy. He wasn't even resisting. He couldn't do anything.
That's not correct.
You can look at the video. So listen, he had him in the chokehold for more than 3 minutes.
Yes.
He couldn't do anything. Even the people around him was pulling his arm to see was he still woke.
No.
The guy was limp.
One moment, sir. One moment. Again, Sean, we're talking and we're having a conversation. I understand we're passionate, but we're having a conversation. I'm not worried about the passion. I just want to make sure we're being clear. So to be clear, there was approximately 3.5 minutes of video. Most of it has been edited on the internet, so no one sees the complete thing. What we know for sure is in several of the clips that we have seen, the man is resisting at some point in the 15 minutes. He is resisting, and it is taking 3 people to hold him down while he's in a chokehold, which means he is breathing and he was alive throughout most of that. We know at some point, which is captured in the video, he stopped resisting. At the moment he stopped resisting, he was released. So the intent, as far as we can...
No, that's not the case. The guy he wasn't resisting. He
was resisting.
Listen,
video shows that.
Listen. For 3 minutes, the 3 minutes that led to his death, the guy was just laying there limp. You could see even the guy who was holding his arm trying to see. No. He was. That video. He's trying to say the video was edited to make it seem like he was just holding him for 3 minutes. And
one moment.
Come on now.
Sean.
You act like the guy was fighting, trying to do some UFC moves or something like that to get out of the chokehold.
Sean.
He wasn't. Once he was in that choke, the guy, that Marine had the best of him. He knew he had the best of him.
Sean.
He knew he had the best of the guy, man. He should be charged with least manslaughter. He should be charged with manslaughter, and he will be.
Sean, if I may respond. Again,
there's no room for vigilantes putting their hands on mentally ill people. I live in Cleveland, Ohio, and I see mentally ill people on public transportation all the time. That does not give me the right to throw them in a chokehold just because they rant and say, hey, I'll hurt everybody on this bus, or I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'll call the police, call the proper authorities, and if he does put his hands on someone, then subdue him.
Well,
cannot subdue you should not be able to subdue and put someone in a chokehold just for making just ranting, just making rants on the subway or the bus.
One moment. That's not
legal. No,
Can I respond?
That's not legal.
Can I respond?
Yeah.
Okay. So, because you're making several statements, and I'm trying to respond to them as you're making them. So let me try and respond in full. 1, mental illness is not an excuse. You can be mentally ill. That doesn't excuse you of violence or threats. 2, the question of was there an overreaction is a separate question. We don't know that yet. There's more evidence and more witnesses to be put out. What I can say, and what I have shown, again, I'm going back to the New York Times for this. I'm putting it on the screen for people to see this. Based on the witnesses' testimony so far, there was a belief that this gentleman was about to imminently attack, that there was going to be violence. When the man is yelling, one moment, when I let you speak, let me make my statement. So when he is saying, and he is screaming at people and saying, I don't mind going to jail and getting life in prison, I'm ready to die, and throw down his jacket. And we know for a fact that this same individual has for weeks, if not months, if not years, witnesses have seen him threaten and attack people at that same F-stop train throughout New York City. He is known for this. This is what we know, that he has been violent in the past. People have witnessed him being violent. And in that very same train, people have been witnesses and victims of his violence. Then in that environment.
Yes. Yeah. And you're right, because I've seen videos as well of him on the subway ranting and making threats. I feel like the city is responsible, and I feel like the guy who murdered him is responsible. It's a 50-50 split.
Now, let me
guy,
interject.
maybe he should have had a lengthy prison sentence. Maybe they should have stopped releasing him and actually and gave him help. They should have either done that. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm not completely disagreeing with you here, but I want to make sure that we see. My point is, first, this isn't racial, and everyone who's putting in race is taking advantage of the public. They're emotionally manipulated.
What I don't want to do is putting people in mind that they can be vigilantes.
No, I have never said that.
And choke mentally ill people just because they feel like they're a threat or they're going to be a threat. That's not okay.
One moment. Well, one moment. Let me address that, because I want to be clear. You make a great point. I am not advocating for vigilantes. I'm not. And I do believe that everyone who breaks the law should be tried by the law and determined if there's a crime that has been made, to the degree that the crime was committed, they should be punished. I will never step away from that. And I'm not saying that the Marine in this case should not be charged with a crime and go through the legal system. I've never said that. I'm not saying that now.
That's really my only problem with this is the guy is a Marine. My grandfather was a Marine, and I know they're well trained. They're trained to kill, and they're trained to not only to kill, they're trained to not kill. They're trained to subdue people in non-lethal ways. And I feel like as a Marine,
no, we're not. I can tell you as a Marine,
you're not. Wait, as a Marine, you're saying you're not trained to subdue people in non-lethal measures.
No, I'm not. No, I'm trained to kill people.
You're not.
No, I'm trained to kill people.
You're not trained to subdue people.
No, that's not the purpose
in
of the
non-lethal measures.
The purpose. One moment. Let me answer you. The mission of the Marine Corps is to engage the enemy through superior maneuver and firepower and remove their willingness and ability to continue to fight. That is directly from the Marine Corps manual. That means I maim or I kill the enemy.
Firearm thing. I understand you're trained to shoot to kill.
That's not shoot. People. No. Understand. By superior maneuver and firepower, we are trained to remove the enemy's willingness and ability to continue to fight.
I'm not talking foreign enemies. I'm talking civilians.
I didn't say foreign.
United States.
I didn't say foreign. I said enemy, period. That is what the Marine Corps is trained for. When I engage an enemy, my goal under the training is to maim or kill the enemy so that they can no longer fight.
Okay, so that goes back to my earlier statement when I say he meant to kill him. He knew what he was doing then, right?
No,
so you don't think he knew what he was doing when he had him in that chokehold for more than 3 minutes? You don't think he had intent or knew those was about to equate to lethal measures? You can look at the video and the picture of the guy. The guy knew what he was doing. How are you going to say you guys are trained to kill, and when you subdue to kill, but then you're going to say in the same breath, oh, he didn't know he was going to kill him or he didn't mean to kill him? That doesn't even make sense. Come on now.
Let me explain myself. You're not giving me the moment to explain myself. So, one, this isn't a war zone. This isn't a war zone. Just because I'm a Marine doesn't mean that every time I get in a fight, after being in the Marine Corps or even in the Marine Corps, that every time I get in a fight, that I'm going to go and kill someone. That just isn't reality. That's not true. You're asking about training. Yes, training is not to subdue. We're not trained to subdue someone. That's a fallacy. So I clarified that. Now, in this non-war zone, where this individual got into a fight, essentially, and tried to subdue this man, is he trying to kill him? Not necessarily. One, I don't know his mental state. I don't know what he was thinking at that moment. Two, what I can see on the video is he's in a non-lethal hold, or potentially non-lethal hold. A choke doesn't mean that I'm going to kill you.
When you're suffocating a person...
Let me finish.
Okay.
And I'll let you speak, but let me finish. A choke is not necessarily a death maneuver. That's not. Many people are choked every day, all the time, and they don't die. It's not.
That's not true. Yeah.
Well, it is true. People get choked all the time. People
Suffocation is a form of a lethal measure, man.
Let me finish. May I finish? Because you're bringing up several things. One, you're assuming that choke equals suffocation. That's not true. That's just factually, that is empirically not true. Can you be choked to death? Yes. Does it mean because you were choked, you will die? No, that is not true. That did happen in this case. That doesn't mean that's the intent because one does not equal the other.
You're right. You got some points. But one thing that I can say, legally, this guy, he will be charged with manslaughter. If not manslaughter, maybe involuntary. What he did was clearly manslaughter. You can't argue that it wasn't. That's one thing you can't.
No, because intent is key in this. Now, I'm not saying that he won't be charged, but it isn't necessarily the case because I can't say it's self-defense. I can't say that it's clear-cut self-defense, although there is an intent that it seems, according to the New York Times, according to witnesses, and based on whether or not he's seen this man be violent in the past, he may have been trying to preemptively defend himself. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know, and I won't comment on that. What I can say is that he may be charged, and he may be innocent of that charge, or he may be guilty. He hasn't gotten to that point. But when I see politicians who are going around saying, well, this is a black lynching, they're emotionally manipulating the public. And I agree with you, the fault is with the city. And we can't leave this out because this is the inciting problem, I believe. When you defund the police, so there are less police available to come and deal with this kind of situation, and it takes them longer to deal with this situation, that creates an environment where this guy died. When you have bail reform and people who have been arrested and arrested and arrested, but they're not being charged with crimes and they are being released back into the public, that creates the environment where we get this situation. The problems,
but
I believe,
he was being charged. He was being charged. They was just releasing him early because
and that's my problem
of the mental illness factor, and that's why I say the city is responsible. So I'm not saying the guy who put him in a chokehold is all on him. I feel like the city is responsible too because, like you say, I'm not from New York. I visit New York often.
Right.
I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm like 4 or 5 hours away from New York. And when I do go out there, I have rode the subway. And you see a lot. You see it every time you ride the subway. You see mentally ill people every day. Yeah. Every day ranting. Some of them do attack people or try to attack people. And I feel like the city the city of New York isn't doing enough to prevent that. And
that's
maybe this is the catalyst to put everything on the spotlight, and maybe this will help change this. You know what I mean?
That's why I'm having this conversation with you, Sean. That's why I'm having a conversation with Blondie and everyone else, because we need this. Yeah. Because I believe, this is my point, because it's really not, my point really isn't about the Marine per se. He's involved in it. It's in part that Jordan Neely was a walking problem. Mental illness or otherwise, he's a problem, not the homelessness. That's not, because homelessness does not equal crime. You and I know that. You said you were homeless before. I was homeless before.
As a teenager, yes. As a teenager, I was. And that's another thing I want to speak on.
Go ahead.
I feel like the guy, in my opinion, was mentally ill. Like, cause when I came in the chat earlier, what touches me about this subject is when I was a teenager, I used to be on YouTube a lot, and I happened to run across his videos impersonating Michael Jackson. This has nothing to do with my opinion about this. This is actually what strikes about it. Is because I heard about it then once I seen it on the news. You can't even recognize him from the videos years ago, 13, 14 years ago. He looks entirely different.
Right.
They said his name, and then they showed the video. I'm like, okay. You know what I mean? And then I happened to go on YouTube, and they showed a picture from years ago. I'm like, hold on, this is the guy I used to watch. I'm like, oh, this is the guy who used to dance on the subways years and years ago. And if you used to follow him years and years back, you would know he was mentally ill, because in between his dancing and then some people would catch him on the subways ranting. He would rant. He would listen. I can even post a link from 12 years ago where he does the same rant. He's ranting about needing money and he's hungry and he has no place to go and people are selfish, not giving, and people are not caring. He literally has a video ranting on the subway dressed as Michael Jackson about literally just saying people don't care about people and such and such and such and such. You can clearly see he's mentally distraught.
Okay, so
He's mentally ill. And
let's address that. Let's address that for a second. And again, I thank you for bringing these points up. Let's address it. He had an extended homelessness and mental illness situation.
I'm not saying every homeless person is mentally ill, but most,
I'm not saying
a
you
lot
are.
of people. And one thing, when I was homeless, one thing I noticed, a lot of the people who were homeless, they were homeless because of mentally illness. They were not able to take care of their own affairs monetarily. A lot of these people were getting benefits, whether from the government, Social Security. They weren't even able to manage that because of mental illness.
I understand. And let me address that because I understand what you're saying. And I'm not trying to take you out of context. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. So please understand that.
And a lot of these people were even military people. A lot of these people served in the military. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And let me address that. So again, this is the failure we've seen. Now, I grew up in New York City. I spent the first 18, 20 years of my life. I'm native New York City from the Bronx. Took trains all my life. There has always been homeless on the trains, always. You will never get rid of it. We have too many people in the city for that. But there are ways to deal with some of those people. Now, everyone who's ever ridden a train more than once in New York City know that 99.9% of the homeless are essentially harmless. They're just going to rant. They'll walk around. They'll do their thing. They will leave you alone and you will leave them alone and nothing will ever come of that. Fine. But there are that 0.01% that are violent. And we have seen this repeatedly. And that number has been increasing. We know that people have been saying that they have seen him be violent and he has been arrested for violence. Now, I'm not blaming him for that. I'm understanding that's the situation. And I am blaming that the city, New York City, under progressive ideology, has reduced the number of police, which means there are less officers to address this. They cut the funding for mental health and homelessness, and I am an advocate for homeless, that they have cut that funding in part to promote climate change, which is a whole separate issue, but that's where the money's going because that's where we're told is the biggest issue. And they have redirected funds to other issues, progressive issues in New York City. And we are not dealing with the rise in crime, which is helped by bail reform and social justice that says that based on your color of skin, you get a reduced, if any charge, it's a reduced charge if you go to jail. Now, I know some people are saying, well, homeless people get arrested so they can go and get food. And yeah, they do. But that could be as simple as stealing or being caught pandering. That doesn't mean you have to be violent. The violence is not justified. It's a problem. And the answer to that is not demonizing this Marine. It isn't making this a racial issue. It's dealing with the root cause. The root cause of the homelessness, of mental illness, of having enough police to deal with this and the other support services. Can you understand my reasoning?
I understand.
No, I'm not asking you to agree. That's not required. I'm asking you to understand.
Yeah.
And that's where my focus is. But I don't hear anyone, and maybe this is me, you're in an entirely different city, you have a different way of looking at it. I don't hear anyone in the media or any of the politicians that are speaking right now that are saying the root problems go to these policies, which are promoted by progressives, that if we deal with those root problems, we will resolve more of these. I'm not saying it's perfect.
I agree. Go
ahead.
That's why I said the city should be as responsible as well, because this was a tragic situation. I'm not just blaming the Marine himself. You know what I mean? Like I said, I would say it's a 50-50 for now, and because, like I say, all the facts are not out there. Maybe you could see another video that's not edited, and maybe there was a tussle, and maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe he was super aggressive.
We don't have the first 2 minutes of what happened
Yeah.
or what was being said. We have the final 3 minutes roughly.
I can just, I don't want to blame the guy. I can just say I'm disappointed because, like I say, my grandfather's a Marine, and I just figured there was maybe other ways to subdue the guy.
No,
That's all.
and I'm trying to, and
I feel
that's
like,
why I'm informing you. I'm not excusing, but I'm trying to make sure, because the media in a minute and a half aren't having the conversation we just had, which is information. Because a lot of people say, well, Marines, they're like police. No, they're nothing like police. We're not trained to be police. That doesn't excuse what we do, especially if we're out of the service and out of uniform. That doesn't excuse him, but it's understanding that it's a very different purpose. And to say, well, he's a Marine and therefore he must be like police and must be able to subdue. No, that is not part of the training. That's not part of the purpose. It's just to understand, so we have a better understanding of exactly what was happening there. Not to say anyone's right or wrong, but that we understand. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
And have I been able to convey some of these things to you? What? Not that you agree, but that I've conveyed what I'm talking about and what the media
Yeah, I understand
isn't.
where you're coming from.
Okay.
It's kind of hard to hear you, so I'm trying to go along with you because I had to mute the video because I don't want the audio to interfere. It sounds like you're far away, but
I understand that.
Like I was saying before, I feel like with him being a repeat offender, and I'm clearly sure he is because there's videos, tons of videos of him ranting, doing the same thing. I feel like those videos should be highlighted as well because, like you guys say, he clearly has a history of doing this, which makes me where I came with the assumption that he's mentally ill. You know what I mean? Because this isn't the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth time he does. He's been doing this for the last 14 years plus.
Right. And
constantly.
And that's a failure of the government because its policies aren't dealing with the root problem. If they gave him help 10 years ago, 5 years ago, earlier this year.
And I feel like a lot of these videos people haven't seen, but they will come to light. If you know what to search on YouTube, you can find them.
But that's
the only
problem.
Videos they do show is when he was doing a Michael Jackson impersonation, but there's tons of videos of him also on the subway, like you say, ranting, and a lot of them aren't threats. A lot of it is just rants, like him saying like he did.
Yeah, but
he said on the subway that day. He has tons of videos of him just ranting like I'm hungry and people are selfish. It's just that's why I kind of feel bad. Yeah.
I understand that, but here's the problem: the media should take the time. I believe most media is about a minute and a half on this story across the nation, and nothing that you and I are talking about, the conversation I've had with Blondie and others on this channel, none of that is being discussed. They're trying to push, it has to be that it's racial. It has to be because the Marine was an evil in his intent. And I say that's avoiding and throwing away the problems that the policies that created this. The policies are the answer. If we want to stop this from happening in the future, it's not having a riot. It's not burning down a building.
You're 100% correct about that. And 100% correct.
And that's what I'm trying to, I don't want to see a riot. I don't want to see them trying to put it together an autonomous zone in New York City, burning down a building or anyone else getting hurt. I want them to say bail reform didn't work, social justice isn't working, and taking and defunding the police is not working. Put the money back into those three things and we will help this situation from ever happening again, or at least reducing it in the future.
Okay, and I agree. I'm going to cut it short.
No problem.
My daughter just came home.
No. Family comes first always. Sean, I thank you for taking the time to speak with me. I thank you for your voice, and I hope you watch the channel in the future as well. And Sean just went, so I thank Sean for taking the time. Blondie, you are more than welcome to also call in 607-242-9247. As we have always said on this channel, we are happy to hear people's voices. We will always give you a chance to speak as long as it's respectful. You don't have to agree. You can tell me you disagree and tell me why you disagree. I'm perfectly happy to hear that. Let's have that conversation. Because the news media isn't having that conversation. Because the news media is avoiding this. Because they're not dealing with the root problems. They're busy trying to politic, to get votes, to get donations, to push people to obey blindly their ideas without understanding the consequences. And that's, I think, important. The consequences are critical because you're not helping anyone with social justice, with defunding the mental health, defunding homelessness. You're not helping anyone by having a revolving door on our jails. It's not helping. And blaming this on black lynching, trying to turn this into a racial issue, it may make a lot of money for Al Sharpton, but it's not going to save anyone. It's not going to help a single person in New York City or anywhere else in this nation. Not once. That's what I strongly believe. And Blondie, again, you may not take his statement that he is willing to go to jail, that he is willing to go to jail for life, that he is willing to die. You may not take that statement as a statement of harm. I do. And I believe at least some of the people on that train, they took it as a statement of a threat. And if you're being objective, not subjective, but if you're being objective, that can and is a statement of a threat. That someone who does that and then throws down their jacket, that they are asserting themselves as being a threat. Whether or not you take it that way, you should be able to understand why others will take it that way. But again, Blondie, if I'm misunderstanding you, and I know much in your text, you agree with most of what I've said. If I'm misunderstanding you, then feel free, call in 607-242-9247. I'm happy to have this comment. I'm happy to have this conversation because the major media won't. And politicians are hearing an echo chamber that's telling them racism, progressive politics. And that's absolutely not the solution. That will not help anyone. At least that's my position. That's my position on that. Let's see, it's been 2 hours. I didn't think this conversation would last half an hour, but I enjoyed. I'm glad that I'm able to have this conversation with so many people. This is what I'll do. Now, every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have a live stream where, just like today, we hear voices from people all across the country. We talk about many, many different subjects. And we always take calls from across the country and around the world. We get people who watch the program in the United Kingdom, in India, in Peru, in Canada. There's about 100 countries that watch what we speak about. I'm happy to hear your voices. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m., we will. And we'll be talking about maybe this and many other things that are affecting us all. And we are happy to hear your voices because you cannot have this conversation intelligently on a tweet on Twitter. You cannot intelligently have this conversation and come to solutions by, a headline or a statement by Al Sharpton. You're not going to get anywhere by trying to have an autonomous zone and burn down the city. It's not going to happen. The only way we get to a better resolution and maybe stop this in the future is if we have a conversation, we deal with the real root causes. And the root cause isn't a Marine. It isn't because of someone's race. It isn't inherently because the guy was homeless. Those aren't the root problems. The media is telling you that so that you're distracted, so they can emotionally manipulate you and benefit politicians like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, to benefit grifters, race grifters like Al Sharpton, that they're going to abuse and use you emotionally and never resolve the actual problem. That's what BLM is doing right now. That's what Antifa is doing right now. But I think I've made my case repeatedly. I think I've made it well. And I think, like with Sean, to a degree, and like with Born Blondie, to a degree, I think people see that. even when they don't agree, to 100%. I'm not asking one to do that. But I look forward to seeing what people have to say in the comments. I believe this was on, I'm not sure if Rumble actually showed the video. I will make sure it's there. And if anyone on Rumble has a comment, please leave it in the comments. I'm happy. I will look and respond to that. I will make sure that this is on politics so that they can see it. I'm not sure if it went through, but I will make sure of that. I will make sure people have heard this because I think this is important. And I think we need to think this through without emotional manipulation. If we want to fix this, we need to get rid of the emotional manipulation and the politicking, because that's not helping anyone. I thank you for taking the time today on a Thursday to speak with me for the last 2 hours. I thank you for taking the time to address this serious subject. Whether you agree or disagree, I thank you and I respect you for your comments and your thoughts. And I look forward to seeing you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m.